Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking all about the Act 1 elites. This video is going to be in 3 parts. The first part is going to be convincing you why you should be fighting elites. I've posted quite a few guide videos at this point, and most of my tips are saying you should be taking elites. The amount of comments I get saying, Reddit told you not to fight elites, your friend told you not to fight elites, you're scared of elites, is unbelievable. So I'm going to finally go in detail as to why you should be fighting elites. Once I've convinced you that you should be taking elites, then we're going to spend the rest of the video explaining how to actually take down the Underdogs elites and the Overgrowth elites. And let's just jump into it. So why fight elites? Well, there's a couple different reasons. For me, the biggest benefit is the increased rare card chance. So elites, we don't know the exact numbers, but in Slay the Spire 1, they had 3 times the rare card odds of a regular combat, which is actually very significant. And so for this slide and a couple of the future slides, I ran a Monte Carlo simulation over going through Act 1 based on how many elites you fight and what type of drops you would get. There's a lot of mechanics into this that you can read about because there's like a pity system where every single time you roll a common card, it increases your chance of hitting a rare card. And then every time you drop a rare card, that resets. You can read all about that on the wiki and stuff. But basically, I did a simulation of that over multiple different combats with different numbers of elites to come to the expected gold, relics, and rare cards you would get. And I did about 50,000 runs to simulate that. And so if you take no elites, the expected number of rare cards you're getting through Act 1, not counting the boss, is about 1.3. Typically, 3 elites is what I say is the target you should aim for. The expected amount of rare cards if you take 3 elites is 2.3 or 2.4, somewhere around there. But it's basically twice as many rare cards from Act 1 with 3 elites as opposed to 0. That alone is a significant boost because rare cards make your deck much stronger. You're getting that before the Act 1 boss, and they help you pick a lane for your deck to build around. So essentially every single elite you fight increases the expected amount of rare cards you take by like 0.3, which is very, very good. If that wasn't enough, they also give you relics. So just to measure the total expected value of fighting elites, I converted relics into gold using their shop prices. And so like fighting 0 elites, the expected value of Act 1 is around like 1600 gold. And you can see 3 elites is not quite twice as much total expected value, but it's much higher. And that's just free money you can get by just fighting different enemy types. Here's like a summary chart of all the findings. So you get slightly more gold just dropped in general from the elites. It's not much. Elites drop twice as much gold on average compared to regular combats. And so in this case, every elite, in the way I did the simulation, every elite fight just replaced a regular combat. So the amount of gold dropped is only like 50% higher for that exchange because you swapped one for the other. So anyway, that's one benefit. You end up with like 70 more gold by taking 3 elites. The card EV is roughly the same because rares don't sell for that much more than commons at the shop. But just keep in mind, like, you get an expected number of rare cards that is essentially double if you're taking elites. The relic EV is very important. You're getting about 3 relics, 1 per elite. So the total expected value of taking them is very high. So just on average, one summary, if you take 3 elites, you're up 3 relics, 1 rare card in like 90 to 100 gold just in Act 1. If you're doing this Act 2, you're up 6 relics, 2 rare cards, and 200 golds. That's like 2 card removes, 2 rare cards, and 6 relics. That is completely run changing, and that can make you so strong in Act 3. And the opportunity cost is actually not that high because elites are very predictable. You know what act you're in, and so when you're in the act, you can know, okay, I have to prepare for these 3 fights. There's only 3 of them. So elites cycle through combat. So if you're taking 3 elites, you don't know what order you're going to fight them, but you know you're just going to fight those 3. You're not going to fight duplicate combats. So you can prepare and just say in your mind when you're drafting cards, how am I going to beat Byrdonis? How am I going to beat the Phrog Parasite? How am I going to beat the Bygone Effigy? You can plan ahead for those combats based on the number of elites you're fighting. You know when they're going to be. And then if your first combat is Byrdonis, you know that's not going to show up again. And then you prepare for these 2. If your second combat was the Phrog, you know deterministically what's behind that 3rd elite door. And once you get to the 4th one, it kind of resets and it could be any one of the other 2. But I think if you're taking 4 elites, probably don't need my advice. You're probably strong enough to handle it. But the predictability is really nice because you can take cards that prepare you for these fights in a way you just can't do for the hard pool enemy combats. It's just much more harder to prepare. So not only am I claiming that elites are just really good for your run, but I'm saying that elites are often easier than the hard pool enemy combats because you know exactly what to plan for. So you can draft your deck accordingly, you can have the right potions, you can just get more experience fighting these enemies. It's just much easier to set up for these combats. And also the opportunity cost of the combats is very low as well because you heal up every single act. So if you don't take the elite combats and you finish Act 1 at full HP, that's so much worse because that extra HP doesn't help you. You don't really want to be finishing Act 1 at full HP. You want to be finishing it like half. Like, fighting an elite, fighting this dude, taking 25, finishing the run at 30 is much better than not fighting this guy, finishing the run at 70, because you're going to heal that HP anyway. It doesn't really matter. And if you're on Ascension 2 or higher, you heal 80% of your missing HP, so it like you do retain some HP, but it's not nearly as much of a benefit as just getting a relic, because many of the relics heal you for HP anyway. So anyway, in summary, elites are much higher expected value to fight them at a very low opportunity cost. You should be taking them. Hopefully that convinced you. If so, we'll move on to the next part of the video. A quick aside before I get into the specific elite guides. Knowing how the elites fight and like what you should be doing on the elites can only get you so far. I posted this video which goes into basically how to play turns better, and it's a very important way to optimize your fight. So if this video isn't helping, go check out this guide. I'll link it in the description. It's extremely helpful for how to maximize your damage and block output in every single combat, and this alone might just help you take down elites. Okay, now that all that out of the way, let's get into the underdogs. And the theme of the underdogs is basically just block. A lot of these enemies, if you have enough block, you can just take them on. So it's kind of cool that you just get to see underdogs and you're like, okay, I might want to take some block cards preparing for these combats. These are the 3 elites you'll be potentially fighting in the act, and we'll just teach you how to prepare for each one. The first and probably the most complicated one to master, but in my opinion the easiest if you're prepared for it, is the Phantasmal Gardener. The damage output is quite low, but it's a little bit tricky to fight, and if you do it wrong, you could really run into some big problems with this fight. But once you learn the tricks and you stay calm, I think this fight can be very easy, especially if you plan ahead. Like you know it's going to come, and so you can take cards that help you a lot. They also have Skittish, which is the first time it's hit each turn, they gain 6 block. So you can't like hit the same one multiple times in one turn. That becomes very inefficient, and that's a very easy way to die. So you want to distribute your damage or have AoE attacks. Like the best case scenario is like block, block, multi-hit, block, block, multi-hit. But their attacks cycle. Every single Gardener cycles independently, and they go in this order. So the one that's doing the 1x3 will then buff afterwards, and then it'll do a 5-hit and a 7-hit, and then 1x3. The buff does 2 strength in the regular games, and then once you get to Ascension 9, it does 3 strength. So after it buffs, it'll do 7 or 8, I think, depending on which Ascension you're on. This will be like 9 or 10, and then this is the scary hit. This will be 3x3 or 4x3, and that's quite a bit of damage. So based on where their attacks are starting, you can kind of calculate where they're going to be attacking on what different turn. So I've run that simulation. So here's a plot of basically the cumulative damage output by each elite based on which one they're starting on. Something that's interesting, if you look, number 1 is never the most cumulative damage ever. So that is like the weakest one, probably the lowest priority. The elite 4, the one that starts buffing, definitely spikes. Like if you're going to turn 7, he does like 10 more damage than the rest of them. But he's not the scariest immediately if you kill him on like turn 2. There are scarier elites that you could be fighting. So I've labeled them here. The second one does the most damage on the first 2 turns because he does a 5-hit and then a 7-hit. So he does 12 damage over the first 2 turns. This one does a 7-hit, and then what does he do? 7 becomes 1x3. So this guy will attack for 7, and then 3, and then he'll buff. And the buffing guy will buff, and then he will move to a 5-hit, which is buffed to a 7-hit, and then a bunch more damage. So the scariest one immediately, this one does 12 damage over the first 2 turns, whereas this one only does 7 damage over the first 2 turns. So if you have like a big hit, you want to target this one first. This one becomes scary by turn 3 because then it does like the multi-hit attack, and that's a lot of damage. This one does the least damage on turn 3 because it's just 10 total, and then it's going to buff. So if the fight's going to go long, probably don't kill this guy. And this guy's like, he does 1/3 and then buff. So he does nothing the first 2 turns. So the couple cards you can do, there's 2 different ways to do this basically. Have multi-hit attacks, you know, stuff that just hits all of them, and then block is very viable. Their damage output isn't that good. Even when they buff, it's not that high. It's like 15 to 18 per turn. If you have like 2 Shrug-it-offs, that kind of covers the full block. So you just need to play calm and have a plan is the most important thing. And there's 2 ways to do it. AoE, hit all of them, or just one-shot one of them. If you are one-shotting them, if you expect a really short fight, kill number 2. That one will do the most damage over the first 2 turns. So killing this early will prevent you from taking 12. If you expect the fight to go 3 or more, kill this one first, because this one does more damage on turn 3, 4, or 5. And then after that, target this one. This one takes the longest time to do the most damage. So don't really worry about this one unless the fight's going for like 7 or more turns. Then it can become a little bit scary. I mean, you can refer back to this graph if you want to, or you can just look at this cycle. If you're like turn 5 and you don't remember what's what, you can just look at this and kind of calculate what's going to happen next for each eel separately. Up next, we've got Skulking Colony. This one has been reworked quite a few times. I'm going off of what is currently on the beta branch in patch, I think, 0.102 or something like that. I think where they're at with it is actually quite good, so I'm not expecting it to change dramatically, but the specific numbers might change. But in general, this is a block check, because it has this shell, which limits how much damage you can do to it per turn. The beta branch is 15 per turn, so you know, your damage output is capped, and so you just have to be able to survive hits. So regardless of how they change this, this has always been a block check, so just having block makes this fight much easier. And this is the current cycle of what it attacks as. It does a 12 hit, it does a 14 hit, and it blocks. And then it blocks, does a 9 hit, and buffs its strength by 2. And then it does a multi-hit attack. Technically it's a 7/2 attack, but it gains 2 strength before it does it, so it's 9/2. And then it'll loop back around to here. But then it'll be 12, and then 16, 11, and then this will become 20, 11/2, which will be 22. So it just does that over and over and over again. And you can only do 15 damage per turn. So this is a graph of the per turn damage this character does and the cumulative damage it'll do over time. The turn 8 is kind of the scariest, unless you get to turn 12, but hopefully you're not getting to turn 12. But turn 8 is like this huge damage spike, because that's when it's going to be doing 11/2. So you really want to plan to kill this before turn 8, because blocking 22 is a lot. If you kill it before that, like the most you have to block, I think, is 18, which isn't that bad. And so the fastest kill you can possibly do if you do max damage every single turn would be turn 5. If you have no defense, this is your best option, but you have more time before turn 8. So you want to average like at least 11 or 12 damage per turn before you take this giant hit. If you can block it, you know, 22 damage is a lot, but you can use a weak potion or something like that. As long as you're killing before turn 12, you should get out of this fight relatively unscathed. And yeah, there's not too much else to say. Like, there's a couple things that are good at Poison and Doom are quite good. Poison, unfortunately, cannot bypass the shell damage limit. So if you give it like 100 poison, it'll only receive 15 poison damage per turn. But I'm fairly certain Doom can kill before the shell threshold. So that's actually quite nice. You can jump ahead of this like hard limit. If you can Doom on turn 3, then you're really not taking that much damage. So Doom is interesting. Poison's fantastic against this, because you just stack up poison and block, and then it'll kill it eventually. Not that hard of a fight. Just have block ready in your mind. If you're in underdogs, you're going to get block cards. That'll help you a lot. Up next is the Terror Eel, which is probably the scariest for the underdogs. But this one, similar to the eels, like a lot of these fights actually aren't that hard if you time it correctly, but timing it correctly can be hard. And that's the challenge in this fight, rather than just like raw damage output. So the key to Terror Eel is timing. And so he has the special mechanic where once you get him to half health or below, he will stagger. And we'll get to that in a second. But his basic attack pattern is actually not that bad. He'll attack for 16, and then he will do a 3/3. He'll gain 6 vigor, and then he'll just repeat that over and over again. So the first time is 16, this is 9, then this one will become 22 from vigor. But he never scales above this. So If you can block for 22 kind of reliably, or 9, like it's 22 damage and then 9 damage, and then 22 and 9. If you can block that kind of reliably, you can just hang out here forever. You don't have to stagger him until you're completely ready. So having good block is actually really nice because it gives you so much time to figure out when to set up. Like you can stack a bunch of poison, you can stack a bunch of doom on him before you get to this part. You can build orbs as the thing, or you can make Osti really big. Once you're ready, once you stagger him, you get a free turn. He's not going to do anything on the stagger turn. So if he's about to hit you and you stagger him, that's great. And then he'll spend a turn applying 99 vulnerable to you. Once he applies the 99 vulnerable, he returns to his regular attack cycle of 16 3x3, 16 3x3. But since you're vulnerable, it's going to be more damage than that. And so you might see big numbers, but the big numbers are only there because you're vulnerable. And if you stagger while it has vigor, it's going to keep the vigor. And so the next hit is going to be much bigger because you're going to get the 16 plus 6 and then vulnerable on top of that ends up being a lot of damage. This is like 39, I think, if you're on Ascension 9. So timing that is also very important because if you stagger him while he has vigor, you're just going to be hit for a ton of damage. If he's not staggered with vigor, he's only hitting for 24 that turn, which isn't that bad. That can give you even more time. So basically, you're just going to, in this fight, block until you're ready to stagger, and then you're just going to try and burst down from 75 as quickly as you possibly can. You can see in this graph, I gave him 22 poison. That makes it much easier to deal lethal damage after the stagger. So stuff like that is great. You know, get time to play your powers, things like that. Because you want to go from 75 to 0 in one go. So just be cognizant of when you're crossing that 75 threshold, because if you're not ready, and if he has vigor, he's going to hit you for 33, and it's going to be bad. If you plan carefully, he'll hit you for 24. It's not that bad. You'll have more time. Things like that. So this guy, a lot of things that can help you stack a lot of damage at one time is perfect. Reap is great because you can retain it, and so you can have this ready to go for like the stagger turn, so that you can clear that threshold and do a ton of damage. So he's, you know, if you get him down to like 78, and then you play a bunch of cards, get him down to like 30, and then you have some Doom, you play Reap, you can one-shot him basically. Doom is great on this guy because it doesn't affect the threshold, so you can stack Doom without triggering the threshold, and then you can put him below the threshold and kill him that turn before he kills you, or kill him the turn that he's applying the vulnerable to you, and use the Doom as essentially free damage. Poison, basically the same thing. And then anything else that can help you stack, like playing powers like Demon Form or Tremble, you can make him vulnerable, and then the next 2 turns you'll do a ton of damage, which will help you burst him down. These are the kind of things you're looking for. A potion can go a long way too. But this is the hardest fight of the underdogs, but if you plan accordingly and stagger him at the right time, he's not that bad. Alright, and with that, we're into the Overgrowth. While the underdogs was like tricky and requires careful timing, the Overgrowth is basically just a test of your raw damage and efficiency with your deck. The theme of the Overgrowth is just do damage. If you're in the Overgrowth, you have high damage, you can clear all of these elites without too much difficulty. Trying to block many of these will cause you problems, except for the Bygone Effigy, but we'll talk about that later. But like trying to block the Phrog Parasite, you're just going to die. So if you're in the Overgrowth, start stacking damage early, and you can take the elites, no problem. In my opinion, Phrog Parasite is the easiest boss. It has really low HP and really low damage. It just requires a little bit of tricky timing on when to stagger it and stuff like that. 63 HP is not that much. It attacks for 16 or 20 on Ascension 9, but it only attacks every other turn. It does give you infestations, which then do damage, and it spawns minions. So there's a little bit more, but the minions, if you time the transformation right, you can basically get like 2 whole turns to attack them before they do anything to you. So it's actually quite manageable if you do it correctly. So the main phase of the Phrog Parasite just goes back and forth between giving you 3 infections and attacking for 4x4 or 5x4 if you're on Ascension 9. And that's all it does. Until you kill it, then it pops and does something else. So the thing I would say, if you have high damage, this is no problem. You could kill it. You could do 63 in 1 or 2 turns if you plan accordingly. It's worth mentioning, sometimes it's worth to wait 1 turn to transform it so that you can get more damage on the stunned minions. Because especially you have like the ability to block this 4x4, you know, and let's say you have an attack that does 42 right now, or you could block this 4x4 and then do the attack this turn and then have way more energy to kill the minions after you stunned him, definitely want to just go for that. Because then the minions have more damage before they start doing anything. It's like you get an extra turn, essentially. Another thing worth looking for is getting the infections after reshuffle versus before. So if you're deciding, should I kill this guy, and he's like giving you statuses, if you've just reshuffled your deck and you have, 18 cards in your deck, you're really unlikely to get to another reshuffle. So those 3 statuses don't matter that much because he puts them into your discard pile. But if you're going to reshuffle immediately after that, then it's a much higher cost to take the statuses he gives you because you're then going to reshuffle them into your deck and then you have to play the rest of the fight with them. So keep in mind what cards are in your deck and if you've just reshuffled or not when he's giving you statuses, because that changes a lot how important it is to transform right then. And so here's the full cycle. He does this back and forth until you kill him. Then these guys spawn stunned. So you get 1 turn to attack them when they're stunned, and then they'll start attacking you the following turn. So just timing this on death is probably the most important part of this fight. If you do it right, it's not too bad. And then these minions, they spawn stunned, and then number 1 and number 3 do the same thing, and 2 and 4 also do the same thing. 1 and 3 both attack you, and then 2 and 4 both buff their strength and give you infestation. And then they switch back and forth between this. So then 2 and 4 will attack you, and 1 and 3 will buff. So you basically want to kill one of each group if possible, because let's say you kill these 2 at the same time. Then next turn you have to block for, like, you're being attacked for 16, right? And that's very scary. Whereas if you killed one of these, blocked this attack, killed one of these, next turn you're only being attacked for 8. And so it's much more manageable to only have to block 8 per turn than it is to have to block 16 and then 0 and 16 and then 0. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you don't want to just take both of these out. It could be worth just taking 6 and blocking or killing one of these instead of one of these. But in general, if your damage is high enough, it doesn't matter that much. If you're not likely to end the fight in 2 turns, it's actually generally better to kill these 2 instead of the ones attacking you, because these 2 are going to attack for 8 next turn. And so if you can kill, like if you're not going to block either turn, if you can kill this one, you're preventing 8 damage and a status. Whereas killing this one on this turn, you're only preventing 6. So if you just have a bunch of damage and no block, killing these can be better. Especially if you have block this turn. Like, if you can kill this and block for 5 this turn, it's almost certainly better to kill this one than it is to kill both of these. And then take 16 the following turn. But if your damage is crazy, like if you're very confident you could just end the fight, you could just kill these instead of blocking. And then if you're confident you can kill these next turn, that's totally fine as well. And so this card benefits a lot from having AoE. So in particular is nice because of the retain. So if you're basically in Overgrowth as the Necrobinder, just take So, unless you've already fought this, because it's so good in this fight, because you can hold it in your hand until specifically the turn you transform, and you just have this pre-planned 8 damage to all the enemies, and it's great. But there's tons of AoE. You should be able to find some before you fight an elite. If you have these in your deck, it's much easier to take this guy down confidently. Up next, we have Byrdonis, which in my opinion is probably the hardest boss, maybe the hardest elite, maybe out of all of them. Definitely out of the Overgrowth. It's just a pure damage race. This elite has high HP, pretty high damage. It scales its damage up every turn. This is just a measure of how efficiently you can deal damage and block. And so the way this elite fights, it gains +1 strength per turn every single turn, and it alternates between a 16 hit attack and a 4x3 hit attack, or technically 3x3, but it gains 1 strength before it does it. So you're going to be hit for 16, and then 12, and then 18, and then 18, and then 20, and so on. So this attack form gains 1 every turn, basically, and this attack form gains 3 every turn. So on average, this is growing its attack damage by 2 per turn, roughly. But starting at 16, growing by 2, like, that is a lot of damage over time. So you want to kill this thing quickly. Here's a graph of the per turn damage and the cumulative damage of this fight. If you don't have block, you're just gonna die, because even it does 100 damage by turn 6 if you're not blocking anything. So if you have no block, you really want to kill this by turn 3. In that case, it's actually not that bad, because the cumulative damage is like 16 plus 12 is like 28 damage. So if you're not blocking at all, if you can do 90 damage in 3 turns, this part's not that bad. But you're never gonna survive this if you're not either doing enough damage to kill it or scaling your block a ridiculous amount. This video will be very helpful for this fight because again, this video just goes into how to most efficiently play a fight in terms of damage and block. And so it's like the best way I can tell you how to do this is just watch this video because it goes in depth on how to do that. So linked in the description if you want to see that. But for Byrdonis, realistically, you can expect to take 15 to 25 damage. Try to kill it in 3 turns. And just have potions ready for this fight, right? You know it's coming, so just don't take elites if you're not prepared to fight this. 1 potion can save you 20 damage in this fight, whether it's a weak potion, a vulnerable potion, or a fire potion. This one's definitely the scariest, but if you plan ahead, you only have to fight this once per act. You have, 70-ish health at the start of the act, so taking 15 to 20 isn't that bad. You'll go down to 50, you'll get a relic, and then you get the other 2 fights will be much easier. And sometimes this is the last elite you fight and you only take like 5 damage, and that's a much better situation. And lastly, we have the Bygone Effigy, which is just a pure damage race. Similar theme as the others, just doing damage helps a lot. This does have the slow mechanic. Whenever you play a card, this does 10% more damage from attacks. So you want to be a little bit careful in your timing. The way this fight works, he sleeps for 2 turns, and then he just does 25 damage to you forever. He doesn't scale, it's just 25 every single time. So you get plenty of time to try and stack up damage. If you're strong, this is the easiest elite fight because he doesn't even attack you. Like, you can perfect this so well if your deck is just a ton of damage. That is hard to do. So oftentimes you do end up taking like 10 damage from this if you end up like blocking and stuff. And it's still not that bad. But yeah, basically the only mechanic to be aware of is you want to play cards in order from least to most damage because it's 10% flat based on the card. So if you have like a 30% boost, playing a bludgeon gets much more out of that 30% boost than like a strike would. But other than that, just do damage, kill it as fast as possible. One thing worth mentioning though, he never scales his strength up. So the other way to take down this fight is just if you can block 25 reliably, this fight is just completely free because it's never going to get scarier. So there's a couple ways to do this, like Barricade or the Ironclad card that doubles block. If you can build a big Osti up, you can block your way through this fight. I've done it a couple times, but in general, it's much easier just to kill it quickly. And with that, we've covered all of the elites. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. Helps the channel out a lot and lets me know you guys want more of these videos. But in summary, basically, if you're in the underdogs, plan to block. If you're in the overgrowth, plan to attack. Learn the specific patterns of the bosses. Some of them, it's all about just key timing, like when you transform a character, when you stagger it, when you do that. And besides that, just getting more efficient, learning to take damage or block early will help you out a lot. I know you guys got this. I'll see you next time.